Dead. Hargreaves. Sir. You again. Must I remind you to only refer to me as the monocle? Really? And why are you still alive, Rumor? Huh? Because she lied to us. That's what Rumor does. She'd been ditching patrol duties. She told us she was studying polygraph science at the library. She'd been running off with a Polynesian knife thrower when you caught her sneaking in after midnight. But she told us she'd been at the library, and what Rumor says always turns out to be true. I had my suspicions when the body turned up. Then I found this on it. Her lie had manifested in another Rumor, at the library. It wasn't long before someone found her, the murder magician and the assistant. Good job, Agent 00.01. To think I led the murder magician to a copy. Fascinating. What? You told that psycho where to find her? Why would you do that? To teach her a lesson. Class dismissed. A bunch of teenagers, born with special powers, adopted into a family by a rich white man in Northeast United States, who takes them away to an academy and trains them to utilize their powers to save the world. Sounds familiar, right? Well, I'm not talking about the X-Men or Charles Xavier, but about Gerard Way and Gabriel Ba's hit comic The Umbrella Academy, which was turned into a Netflix TV show. Gerard Way, most known for being the lead singer of My Chemical Romance, makes his foray into comic books. But as you might know if you've read a lot of comics, a lot of times these celebrities getting involved in comics tends to not produce the best quality output. Oftentimes it's a vanity project or a backdoor attempt at getting a film greenlit where they'll have the main characters look suspiciously like the actor or musician themselves in an attempt to get more of the creator profits if it were to be adapted into a movie. But the Umbrella Academy is different. It's widely beloved. It, like I said, was a very successful Netflix TV show. So what makes it different? Why does Umbrella Academy work, whereas so many other vanity celebrity comic book projects don't? Let's dig into that today. Hi, my name is Steven, but you might better know me by my superhero alter ego, Spike Stonehand. And welcome to my channel, Divining Comics, where I explore the magic hidden between the panels of your favorite comics.
Boys and girls, your attention, please. Presenting a new exciting radio program featuring the thrilling adventures of an amazing and incredible personality.
If this is your first time here, I'd like to extend a gracious welcome. Thank you for checking out my video. If you like what you have here, you can support this channel in a few different ways, giving me a like, subscribing to the channel so you don't miss any more updates, and commenting below with what you thought about the video. All of these things help this channel in the algorithm. They help spread the video to further people who might be interested in what I talk about. But what do I talk about here? Well, I'm doing the Divining Comics 52 Comic Challenge. That is where I pick 52 comics from 52 categories designed to expand my knowledge of the breadth and depth of comic books as a historical and global art form. And so I'm exploring comics from countries that I might normally read them from, and from artists and genres that I might normally read them in. And you can participate in this challenge as well. There is a link in the description to all of the different categories that you can join along in the challenge and let me know what you're reading and how you like or don't like it. You can also find my writing over at my blog, spikestonehand.com. I have weekly new comics, buyer's guide, and links to news, reviews, interviews, YouTube videos, podcasts that I think are worth your time to check out. I love to share the love. If you're a fellow comic book fan and you're talking about comics, let me know and I'll check your stuff out. And if I like it, I'll talk about it in my newsletter. All that aside, let's dig into the comics. So the Umbrella Academy is, like I said, about there's a number of children that are all born at the exact same time that develop superpowers, it seems. 7 of them are adopted by the Monocle. That's the alter ego of this Professor X type figure who adopts them all and raises them into become superheroes to defend the world. He gives them all numbers and code names, so 00.01, 00.02, etc., all the way up to 7. And then code names so they can kind of adopt branding personas to save the world, right? So we start off with them in the opening sequence as young children. Jumps ahead to them now as adults, and they've all disbanded. They don't really like each other that very much, and they all have problems with their dad, their adopted father, but he has passed. So they all come to his funeral, where they clash, they fight, and they find out that the world is ending, and they have to figure out how they can team up together to stop that from happening. So this is the first comic that I'm covering in April for what I'm calling Adaptation April, because, like I said, this was adapted into a TV show, and all of the comics I'll be covering this month have been adapted in some form or another to TV shows, movies, a Broadway play. You probably know what that one is if you know anything about comics. But so this first arc, these 6 issues, are very much adapted into the first season of the Umbrella Academy show, which I have seen, and I wasn't the biggest fan of the TV show. I think a lot of the plots for me, they felt like they kind of dragged. It was hard for me to get through, the whole first season of stuff, and reading this comic, I think I figured out why. This comic is paced really quick compared to the show, right? There's a lot of character development moments that maybe you like and maybe you don't like on the show that just they don't have time for in this first arc of the comics. I was actually surprised looking it up that there's only around 24, 25 issues of Umbrella Academy altogether, and that's including there's a series going on currently. It's just kind of a 4 or 5 miniseries that have all been done, and not like I had assumed it was kind of, maybe they'd gone up to 50 issues or something over a number of different miniseries. No, it's just each arc seems pretty self-contained, and they seem to be only 6 or 7 issues. There's a lot less of it than I would have thought, and so I can see why the showrunners, when adapting it to Netflix, felt like they had to add a lot. They had to add a lot of character moments and beats, but that really slowed things down for me compared to this comic that really leaves a lot for the reader to interpret, to add in and assume things themselves, right? And I think that's one of the beautiful things comics can do, right? Scott McCloud talks about in Understanding Comics, the power of the gutter, right? The space between panels, where the reader can assumes what happens in that motion, right? If you have somebody winding up for a punch, and then the next panel you see the other person being knocked backwards, right? You can assume in between the panel that a punch was thrown and it knocked the guy backwards, even if you don't actually literally show it, right? And that's broadly true even about less literal moments of action in comics, and this does a really good job of that. There are so many details that are hinted at, but not fully explored in a way that might render them inert or boring. One example that comes to mind is Vanya, the character played by Elliot Page in the TV show. Here, she does not like her father has fully broken with the family more than any of the other characters, and in fact she wrote a tell-all memoir about all of the things that he did, the ways that she thinks that he mistreated them, and we don't really get the details on it. We don't get the specific accusations she made. We just learned that she wrote the book and that the rest of the Umbrella Academy doesn't like that she did this. It felt like that even if they agreed with some of the things that she said, that it was, airing dirty laundry out of turn. And then I think that that's a really good moment of characterization, right? You could get too into all of the specifics, all of the bad things that their adopted father did, but it's much more powerful, I think, to show us maybe just a moment like in the flashback where he's not treating them kindly. You get in the bonus material at the back of the trade paperback that I read digitally. You get a moment of like a free comic book day issue where he's again treating them unkindly, but you don't get a whole lot of specifics. You just get kind of the broad picture. I think that is much more powerful, much better use of storytelling. And I think that that's incredibly impressive for Gerard Way, who this is their first comic written, right? That he kind of just jumps into this guns a-blazing and is able to deliver a very impressive comic. A lot of that, of course, is due to the art of Gabriel Ba, who is an incredible artist. I would say definitely in the if you have, in music, you talk about, post-punk, right, or post-rock. Gabriel Ba's post-Mignola, I would say that they're kind of taking the lessons that Mignola was able to show what you could do with comics, and then applying them in different and unique ways. So these characters often do have kind of almost caricatured body shapes. It almost looks the way that a lot of stop motion animation will, or these all the characters have different body sizes and face shapes, so you can really tell their silhouettes, who's who, very easily. Has a very European clean style. The art itself was spectacular from Ba, and just as there is a lot of details that are left to the imagination in the actual plot that I think really works. There's a lot of details that are hinted at visually that you don't really get into in depth, but really add to the world, right? There's lots of little newspaper clippings and headlines. There's fun little character moments or items left on a desk, things put on a wall that tell the story very quickly, very succinctly, without giving you all the details. So that for example, the way that Space Boy #1, that he had some sort of accident where he had to have his head attached to the body of a giant gorilla in order to continue living. And it doesn't tell you what the accident was here. It doesn't get into the details of the surgery or any of that. It shows you very quickly through these newspaper clippings and posters and such what happened. And I think that's really effective storytelling. And like I said, for something so short, only 6 issues here, there's so much world building, so much story being delivered in very efficient and interesting ways that let you, the reader, kind of fill in the details, and it really feels like you're engaging with the narrative in that way, and in a very interesting way. And I think part of the visual strength of the series, I didn't know this, comes from Gerard Way's skill as an artist. In the back of the trade paperback I read, they had a bunch of Way's original drawings for all of the characters that were used in the pitch to Dark Horse before they picked the series up, and they're incredible. Like, I think if Way wasn't a touring musician, he could have done this series by himself. It could have been a fully cartooned comic, and maybe the only reason that they got another artist on is just because of the time constraints, that Way would rather spend their time doing music and touring, and not drawing a comic, which can be a very labor-intensive and time-consuming endeavor. But his artwork is incredible. He's really talented. He's got a strong visual sense, and I think that leads to part of the strengths of this comic, right? When you read a lot of comics from first-time writers, especially from people that don't come from comics, they can tend to be very wordy. They can tend to describe everything in detail. The pacing can be wonky. None of that is here at all. I think that Way clearly is a visual thinker, can think in ways that comics are well suited towards, and that really comes through. I think at one point I was reading these things, and I thought, man, either Way is just a naturally gifted storyteller, or they have a really good editor on this series. And then I saw who edited the series, and I said, no, I guess I'm going to give all the credit to Gerard Way there, because the editor, not a good person, turns out. One thing that I think, if you're a fan of the TV series and you return to reading this comic, that you find is that because it is so short of a story, I think that there are a lot of characters that are more kind of persona than person, if that makes sense. For example, Seance, the character who can channel the dead and speak to them, doesn't have a whole lot going on in this 6 issues. He's more of a comic relief, fun character. He has a few moments here and there where he delivers some sort of speech or relevant plot action, but the central characters of this story are Space Boy, right? right? You got Kraken number 2, who, is kind of the Nightwing-esque Punisher. I don't care how dark I am and brooding I am. I get results. And then Vanya, who is I would say much more villainous in this story than in the TV show. And again, understandably so. She was very mistreated by her father, but she definitely is much more complicit in the villain's actions than I would have thought. And then obviously, if you've seen season 1 of the show, this ends very differently than season 1 of the show. It ends with the much more obvious possibility for where stories can go from here than the first season of the show, which without, so I don't want to spoil things in case you want to watch the show, but yeah, there's definitely, you can see where the story would go in the comic a little more clearly to me. Lastly, I just want to praise again Way for the world building. This universe is a fun alt worlds kind of thing, even though it seems in a lot of ways like our own. It has a lot of that kind of 60s comic science, but in a not real science, 60s science in a comic book way. You can imagine characters that are, getting powers from radiation or, having laser guns. They casually go to the moon and back in personal shuttles. They have televators, which let them teleport into elevators, I guess. There's just a lot of really cool world building that is done in this series that makes it feel very vintage or retro, but in a modern art style and in a more modern story that I found. And I do wish you would get to see a little bit more from Rumor. She is, like I said, the main character focused on in the Free Comic Book Day story, and she has an incredibly cool power set, it seems, where she can kind of say, rumor has it that such and such happened, and then it becomes true. And that's kind of a very cool, very strong, fascinating power, but it doesn't get as explored here in the main narrative. So maybe in future volumes, you get more of that. So wrapping things up, who would I recommend this for? Obviously, if you're a fan of the show and you kind of want to see where things started from, the genesis of these ideas, I think that there's a lot here that you could find value from. Even though it is very similar to that first season of the show, there are enough differences that I think could leave you still engaged and still interested. I think that if you like the kind of if you like Hellboy comics, I think that's a great comp for this. It is very kind of that pulp comic, but in a modern aesthetic sensibility that appeals to so many people. And then if you like Gerard Way, if you like My Chemical Romance, I think a lot of their sensibilities come through in the comic because Way did write it, and I think that so much of the imagery of the Black Parade or things like that get channeled through here. So would I continue reading this series? I think, yes, I very much would continue reading, especially since there isn't actually as much as I thought. You could read through the entirety of what's been published in a week very easily, I think. So I would definitely be interested in checking more out from the Umbrella Academy and kind of seeing where the story goes from here and how the characters grow and change, and especially where they end up in kind of a dark place at the end of this first volume. So how do they continue? What is the story next? And I can see how the characters and their relationships might change, but what would be the big plot contrivance? There's still a few mysteries at this point in the series, especially around their origin, around their father. But I would love to see where it goes from here. Thank you for watching this video. Again, I would love it if you would share this video with a friend who loves comics. I'd love it if you hit the notification button so that you never miss one of my videos, because they're so important. They're so necessary for the culture, for the moment, the conversation, and you don't want to miss out on this. I mean, what isn't there to like? Thanks again for watching, and until next time, never let the magic of comics die.
Old Enoch, he lived to be 365. When the Lord came and took him back to heaven alive, I saw the light from heaven shining all around. I saw the light come shining, I saw that light come down.